everyone, and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today, we are going to revisit the subject of an earlier video, the ongoing torrent of misinformation from Discovery Institute, and specifically Dr. Kaysi regarding human-chimp genome similarity. So this all started with this paper published on April 9th, 2025, in which, by one measure called gap divergence, the human and chimp genomes were reported to differ by about 14%. Now, obviously, this is a lot higher than the 1 to 2% number you usually hear, which is determined through a different type of comparison entirely. That's not the point of this video, so I'm not going to go into the difference between the two right now. It's just background for what we're talking about here. Now, there have been a ton of articles at Discovery Institute on this. As of my last video on this, there were 16, and there have been a few more since then, but I'm going to go back to one of the early ones. So Discovery Institute and Dr. Kaysi have gone all in on claiming that this 14% is a revision of the 1%. For example, in this article, where Lyskin writes, quote, "The famous 1% difference between the human and chimp genomes, touted across the breadth of popular and other scientific writing and teaching, has fallen." So it's very clear he's treating this as, we thought it was this, now we know it's this. I pointed out this sleight of hand in this earlier video. The short version is that it's not a revision of the 1% number, it's a completely different comparison, and those two different comparisons get you two different results. Again, that's not what we're talking about here. Today, we're talking about how Lyskin uses this figure in the article that I just showed you to misrepresent the findings in question. Now, before we get into the specifics, I want to make clear the two things that Lyskin and Discovery Institute are trying to accomplish with all of this. First, the obvious thing here is they're trying to undermine human-chimp common ancestry. Lyskin won't come out and say that, not really, because Discovery Institute has a reputation to uphold, and they can still fool some of their audience into thinking they aren't just run-of-the-mill creationists. So he won't say it, but that's the first thing we're going for here, that humans and chimps are too different to have a common ancestor. And if you've been paying attention to the stuff that Lyskin has been saying and putting out for the last, year or two, you see a lot of skepticism of human-chimp common ancestry kind of weaved in there. The second thing Lyskin is trying to do here is undermine the honesty of the whole field of evolutionary biology and science more broadly. He implies a nefarious attempt to hide these earth-shattering data deep in the supplemental information for this article. He writes, quote, "The researchers, for whatever reason, I'm not a mind reader, chose to bury that remarkable finding in technical jargon in their supplementary data section." And then later he writes, "The same number shows up again, buried deep in the supplemental data where they compare various ape to human genomes. They're findable if you know where to look, but should I say buried or hidden?" Never mind that these numbers aren't new, that aren't the point of the paper, and there's usually a limit to the length of papers and the number of figures. So you have to pick and choose what goes in and what gets released as a supplemental. This is standard stuff, and Lyskin is making it seem like data is being hidden. Put a pin in that, by the way, because that's going to be relevant in like 2 minutes. Now we're getting to the point of this video. In trying to accomplish those two things, undermining human-chimp common ancestry and the credibility of scientists, Dr. Kaysi Lyskin, Associate Director for the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture, edited a figure from the supplemental information of that paper, and in doing so, hid data that undermines his arguments. Here's a comment that was left on my earlier video on this saga, which I will read for you. This is the comment, quote, "Dan, what you are missing in your rebuttals on this topic is that the same Nature paper that Kaysi makes a big deal about lists the following gap divergence between members of the same species. Human-human 3.48%, chimp-chimp 8.09%, bonobo-bonobo 8.8%, orangutan-orangutan 6.6%, and gorilla-gorilla 13.81%. If there is so much divergence within a given species, the human-chimp divergence of about 13% is not only unsurprising, but totally expected because humans and chimps diverged about 7 million years ago. Importantly, and this is the key part, everybody, importantly, Kayce cropped out parts of tables from the original paper showing these numbers in the supplementary data, please look it up, and only showed interspecies comparisons in his articles at ENV. Then he claimed the journal Nature hid information. He's the one who actually hid the data in his articles and interviews. Well, that sure would be interesting, wouldn't it? So naturally, I had to find out for myself, so I went and downloaded the supplemental information, which I hadn't done before, and wouldn't you know it, it's true. Here's the complete figure. As you can see, there are a lot more rows in the original compared to what Leyskén showed in his article, what I showed you a few minutes ago. In fact, let's put them side by side. I'm going to try to edit this so you can clearly see the two figures side by side, scaled more or less the same, so that it's clear what the differences are. You can clearly see how Leyskén cut out the whole bottom part. I'm gesturing to where I think I'm going to edit it in. I hope I'm doing it right. Leyskén cut out the whole bottom part. What's down there? Those are within species comparisons using the same techniques. And we're going to look at those numbers a bit because they're kind of notable. Now, I thought, based on what I had been reading from Discovery Institute, I thought it was those dastardly evolutionists concealing data and the brave truth tellers at Discovery Institute shining the light on forbidden knowledge. But apparently that's not the case. So let's take a look at those, should we call them hidden data? Why does this matter? Because the within species differences due to gap divergence, the metric that Leyskén points out is 14% differences between humans and chimps, is over 8% just in chimps. And it's over 13% in gorillas. Remember, one of the main implications here is that humans and chimps are so different, they can't have a common ancestor. Do gorillas not all share a common ancestor? And also, let me point out again the other major thrust of Leyskén's many articles on this topic. It's bad scientists hiding inconvenient data. Not a great look to make that case while hiding inconvenient data. The lesson here, folks, is that there's nothing groundbreaking about these numbers. They don't undermine human-chimp common ancestry, nor the credibility of the people working in the field and reporting these comparisons. If they did, people like Leyskén wouldn't have to misrepresent them to make their argument. And that's how you know there's nothing here. So thanks again for watching, and don't get fooled.